All right, so I'm going to go through my notes from the Rebel Capitalist Live, June 2022, and kind of outline what I learned there. And so let me share my screen here and get started. So this is George and me. I finally got to take a selfie with him. I told him I was going to do this. He thanked me and said that that was awesome. So the first speaker was Lynette, and I'm going to have to go to my notes. Lynette Zhang with ITM Trading. I guess I'll just do it like this because I'm going to need to see my notes to read them. But she had a lot of interesting things to say, like everybody that was there. She started out Saturday morning and believes the governments have a plan. And I've already talked about this myself, but the NSA has a white paper on crypto. She was talking about how to make a mint with cryptocurrency, it's called. So she said that the dollar is principle, not purchasing power. She said that decentralized crypto is outside the system, and so the governments don't like them, basically. But they did have a plan to create a more centralized version. The IMF encourages against abandoning crypto after the Terra crash. So they're coming out with different news stories, and she was talking about those because they're creating their own that they want everybody to use. What she is a gold bug. She wants people to hedge their bet with gold, and indicated that gold is decentralized because of the innate qualities of it. So she indicated the real estate market is being targeted by the Fed, kind of like the stocks and like stock markets and bond markets. The downside with real estate, in her opinion, is debt. And she pointed to the great financial crisis and indicated that, if you do have a bunch of debt, the value of your house goes down, then gold can help with that. So you're still going to need to pay taxes. You can do that by exchanging gold for dollars. And she looked at the Japanese market and in the 80s and said that residential real estate fell 85%, and she's of the mind something like that could happen here in the United States. She thinks that governments become part democratic and part dictatorship. She calls this an anocracy, which is the definition of anocracy, and encourages everybody to be as independent and self-sufficient as possible. In order to be effective, central bankers need to be believed. Forward guidance is a key tool used extensively since 2008. This is pretty interesting for her to bring up. And she said that this forward guidance could indicate systematic collapse of the entire economy. The bond traders are declaring the death of forward guidance sooner than 3 to 5 years left, basically, that the central bankers will be able to dictate what happens in the market. She pointed out that social unrest is rising. People are actually waking up to the problems that exist, and it's adding risk for global guidance because people are waking up. So the central planners, the Davos crowd, the World Economic Forum, she was talking about a lot of those. Food, water, tradability is what she recommends people have, and to own gold to take wealth out of the financial system. So she likes collectible gold coins and it likes the portability of those, because if you go through an airport with those in your pocket, the TSA agents don't even know what they are, or how valuable they might be. So it's a great way to transfer wealth. This is in reversing its position, the Fed appears to have abandoned years of carefully calibrated forward guidance intended to help pin bond yields and support the global economy in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, referring to 2009. And she's signaling the likelihood of 75 basis points a hike after this week had a cost in the Fed's forward guidance credibility taking a hit. So she's basically talking about the Fed credibility of the Fed just sort of going down over time. And so yeah, future of expected rates, she thinks is going to go up. So that was Lynette. Check her out on itmtrading.com. She's got a lot of good information about what she's doing, and I'll talk about that a little bit. She's building a compound basically that will sleep 40 people and house 40 people, and they're going to be self-sufficient off the grid up there. And then Mark Moss, the number one, markmoss.com is where you can find out more about him. He is one of my favorite people to listen to about Bitcoin and the economy and how it's really changing the world. And actually had a chance to talk to him for like an hour or two around the pool on Friday after I got there. We talked about all kinds of stuff. We talked about saunas, the benefits, different types. Like he just had somebody on his podcast that was talking about a cool light bulb that you can get. Can't remember the name of it, but it penetrates your body to help heal. And talking about oils and how basically any processed oil can have adverse effects and it's not very good for you. Butter and things like that are much better. So anyway, so Mark said, how is Bitcoin doing? And he then posed the question, well, over what time frame? And so if you look at the 24-month history of Bitcoin versus FANG, so Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, they're up about 15% in 24 months, and Bitcoin's up 429%. And now they're all down basically. So look at things relative is what his message is. And he thinks that we're seeing the uncoupling. We will be seeing it in the near future of Bitcoin to the NASDAQ. It's been following it pretty closely. And encouraged us to stop looking at price. With new technologies, he thinks it's important to watch two things. One, the growth of the network. So there's something called Metcalfe's law. It states that the network's value increases with the network's size. So like Bitcoin has been growing since 2009, the network is more valuable. So back then it was less than 1 cent to buy 1 Bitcoin, and now today when I'm recording this, it's about $20,000, and the high was about $69,000. So that's one thing that we need to look at with new technologies and Bitcoin specifically in this case, and then development on the network was the second thing that he looks at. So if you look at Bitcoin's hash rate, so the hash rate is essentially the amount of energy a mining machine would consume relative to because of the hash rate. So as the hash rate goes up, you're using more energy to produce Bitcoin. And so he has a little comparison here to Litecoin and some other things here. It's kind of hard to read, but talked about development on the network. And because we're seeing people develop on the network like Jack Dorsey, Caitlin Long, and Michael Saylor for, he is 5 times leveraged up, owns I think 130 some thousand Bitcoins at this point. And so he's very long Bitcoin. So the time horizon is really what he encourages us to look at. And the layer 2 and where we're seeing development is the Lightning Network. It's allowing payments to be done faster, cheaper, and more private than ever, which is another benefit to Bitcoin, which is privacy. And he has some really good videos. I encourage you to take a look at him. The revolutionary, the 3 cycles that are converging right now, 3 revolutionary cycles. And if you look up Mark Moss, 3 cycles, there's a good video of that. And he calls it the PSC. So it's political, social, and cultural cycles that are coming together. And this happens about every 250 years. When these 3 cycles converge, was his main talking point the last year at the Rebel Capitalist Live that I went to. So the political cycle, which is part of human nature, then we have the technological cycles and revolutions, and then we have financial cycles and revolutions. So we talked a lot about 1971, the computer processors were created, and then that was like 50 years ago, right? So now there's another technological revolution coming, which is Bitcoin. And these cycles repeat. So he had an example of the bike revolution back in 1890, an automobile revolution. And what happens every time, and we're seeing this in the crypto market now, is that there are too many competitors. I think there's 20,000 different cryptocurrencies out there today. And when we saw the bike revolution, there were just thousands of people that were making bicycles, and then Ford won the automobile competition when all these people came out with different ways to create an automobile. Anyway, that's kind of what he was talking about. It's pretty interesting to think about in that aspect. So the revolution is decentralizing at the information age. And on to, it's so written in the white paper of Bitcoin, it's time, they call it time chain, not blockchain actually. I've never heard that before, but time equals money, money equals time. Decentralized time stamping is kind of what Bitcoin's doing. So what the Satoshi white paper basically did was took existing things, cryptography existed, money existed, all these things, and put them together to make something new. And he said to equate cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin means that you don't understand either of them, because Bitcoin is completely different from all other cryptocurrencies. Proof of work, meaning that you actually have to consume energy to create something like mining gold or mining Bitcoin. Work is the arbiter of truth. Proof of stake is more like voting or democratic, and it's centralized. So you can think about proof of stake. Okay, a company came together, formed, call it Ethereum because that's in the news right now, and basically they're taking it from proof of work to proof of stake, which means it's democratic. And you might think, well, democratic is good, but actually when it comes to a currency, democracy isn't good. So it's important for a group of people not to be able to vote to change something. This, like a currency, he pointed out an example recently of Solana. They created a smart contract on their network to remove the largest holder of Solana tokens. So this holder, whoever she had 20 million tokens. They voted to liquidate and divide up those tokens from an account. Not good, and not everything needs to be centralized. The so the apps are important. So the light bulb was the first electric application. So we have applications. They're essentially the money. They the Lightning Network is an application that runs on top of the Bitcoin network, and then finishes with Bitcoin is at a generational buying opportunity right now. So this is a cool chart. What this line is in the middle is before and after the creation of the Federal Reserve. And you can see after the Federal Reserve was created, what happened to the money. It's just wildly fluctuates over time. Pretty fascinating. And he thinks that Bitcoin is the asymmetric bet right now. It's at a generational buying opportunity, like I said, and has some breakdown here. Next speaker was Chris Martenson, peakprosperity.com. He's fascinating. He talks about energy, which is a very important topic right now. Energy is what keeps economies alive. And talked a lot about the fracking, oil fracking, and how, you know, those are very good sources of energy. They don't live very long. So a fracking operation has a lifespan, and it's not very long. So they're coming to an end, actually. Shale wells have a ferocious decline rate as well. Energy Secretary, he was talking about the Energy Secretary, said she was just recorded, or she was on TV, and somebody asked her how much oil the country uses per day, and she didn't know. She said she would have to look it up. She says that we will come out of this crisis with clean energy. And Chris talked a lot about that. And, you know, while it sounds like a great idea, it's just not possible with anything but maybe nuclear. And showed a chart of all the clean energy. If you look at what the clean energy sources produce in terms of what we need, it's essentially nothing compared to oil. So abandoning clean energy that quickly is just too complicated and too complex. He thinks that maybe in the next 80 years it'll happen. That we're going to need about 25 years in his estimation just to figure out how to transition. And we've never transitioned from one energy source like oil to something else in less than 50 years. And he doesn't think that can change. Quantity and quality from an oil perspective is very important to know, because you have to know how refineries work. And each grade of oil that's produced by these refineries or found in different parts of the world is used for something different. So Europe just turned off Russian oil. And you think, well, Russians are doing bad things, baby. They started this war. Well, for the world economy, this is very bad, because these different types of oil are used to create 2,000 different refinery products. And the reason that's important to understand is because you can't just all of a sudden figure out how to use a type of oil that's been used to produce a particular type, say tires, you know, for 100 years, and then figure out how to use a different type of oil to produce the same tires. It's just not. It's not logical to think that that's even something that can happen even quickly, if even at all. This is an interesting chart. This is the GDP in proportion to oil consumption. The US produces the least amount of oil, and we use the most out of the entire world over China, Japan, Germany. You can see on the chart there. But anyway, it was a super interesting talk that he did. he said that the U.S. right now thinks trans rate issues are the most important thing, but transferring from oil to a different type of energy, like clean energy, solar, wind, what have you, is what we're focused on, but it's just not working out for the economy. Yeah, Biden just released strategic oil reserve, and like it was his last choice to try to fix it. Didn't do anything. There's a global shortfall of oil, diesel, and gasoline, as you can see on the chart here on the right. He put up. So what I found was super interesting was like in between 2015 and 2020. There's something called the FID, the first investment decisions, that these major corporations or the major investors around the world, the largest money funds in the world, look at, and they look at the FID. And because the energy was so cheap and there was such a small return on it, they didn't put any of this financing into producing oil or energy in general. And so that led to a huge shortage. And we're seeing, like, this chart on the right here shows stockpiles. They're just declining at a rapid pace. And because these FID decisions for 5 years weren't made to produce energy or oil, it's going to take 5 years to get refineries up. So now, because of that, and because the stockpiles are going down extremely fast, this chart here on the left shows the shortfall. So the amount of oil demand and supply balance, basically. So you're seeing that the demand is the amount of supply for the demand has been negative since Q3 of 2020. So it's getting bad. And so he talks a little bit about the Fed. They're kind of between a rock and a rock because, you know, they can try to shrink asset prices, increase rates the way they always do. And more people will talk about this later that I'll tell you about. And he just thinks it's a global crime scene by the major central banks, essentially creating this problem in the first place. The global credit impulse, so the new credit entering the system as a percentage of GDP, gross domestic product, is very negative. He says that you're going to see a lot of borrowing soon to fix this, and anticipating a negative 20% corporate profit of some of the biggest corporations. He thinks that the leadership is just ignorant. For example, California proposed doubling the tax on the Californians, and then and that was like, I guess in January. and February they ran out of U-Hauls because people just fled from California and moved to places like Texas and Florida. So he says right now we need to focus on the bottom layer of the Maslow pyramid of hierarchy, just to be able to be prepared for what's coming. They had a panel then. It was Lynette Zhang, Chris Martenson, Mark Moss, and Doug Casey, who went last. He's a fascinating guy. It was about resilience, and that was when Lynette talked about her bug out spot on the top of this mountain that you can't get. There's no road there. It's just like a trail. She's trying to figure out how to find tires that don't pop. But it's a huge place for 40 people. They're building like 3 huge greenhouses to grow their food. They have people for security. They have water. They have fish ponds for food. It's pretty crazy. Doug Casey, he says the political and financial risks are huge in the next few years. He said it's important to internationalize yourself. He likes to go to Uruguay, things like that, but he's super rich, so Not a lot of people might have that option, but says if you can, to try to figure out that now. Mark Moss says money gives us optionality. He built a ranch outside of Austin that he doesn't live at, but he does Airbnb, which is pretty cool. So he's making an income from that, but it just gives him an option if he needs to. Texas is probably going to be one of the best places to live because you want to look at who your sheriff is. In his town, the sheriff is very open to militias and things like that. All the neighbors are kind of like-minded. He's also building a house in Mexico, so he has a place to go there. But he has communities all over the place, like El Salvador and different places over the world that if he needed to, he could go there, even though he doesn't have a place there. He said, I have friends there that, would take me in if it came to that. So as you can kind of tell, nobody had anything positive to say about what's happening and what is likely to happen in the near future. It could get really, really bad. Chris Martinson went to Wisconsin like right before in January of 2020, right before the coronavirus. He's like, basically trust your gut. That's what he did, and he moved like right in the nick of time, where he has a lot of more freedoms there than where he was previously, which I think was in California. They talked a lot about how to create a plan B and decide what's right for you to create your plan B. So right now you're living in plan A. This is what you choose. But what happens if a lot of the things that you have now aren't there anymore? So what is important to you? Is food important to you? Probably. Well, find out where you can get food. If you want to try to grow your food, start small, he said. And he used a great analogy, or not, story of him asking this farmer how long it would take him to be able to grow all of his own food that he needed, like fruits, vegetables, and things that would grow in a garden. And he said 10 years. And he said, well, what if I'm a really smart person, I'm a doctor, I'll read everything. For me, how long would it take? And the farmer said 10 years. And so I thought that was funny. But the point of that is that you really don't know how long it's going to take to grow 100% of your food until you've done it, because every place is different. You don't know what your soil is like, and it's just a process that takes a lot of time. So he encouraged you to grow maybe 10% of your food that you're going to need for a while, and then it's a lot easier to go from 10% to 100% if you have to. Thought that was really insightful. There's a Les Brown quote. It goes, it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. Love that quote. I'm a Boy Scout, so that speaks to me. Okay, so Jason Hartman was next, jasonhartman.com. He is a real estate professional. What he's done for a long time is puts together portfolios for investors, just average people that would like to invest in real estate. And these are single family homes in good markets all over the country. But he talks a lot about compared to what, and is real estate expensive or cheap? And he thinks that you have to ask the question compared to what. And he says the inventory is increasing, like single home is what he's professional and expert in. So he talks about single family homes are still low in inventory. It's increasing a little, but there's a lot of headwinds that we're faced with. Rising mortgage rates, like they still aren't high, and you have to like compare to what? So 5 or 6% mortgage rate is not, interest rate is not that actually that high compared to what we've seen historically. Those 3% rates that we just saw, that it was an anomaly. They were artificially low. And we also have to look at things or headwinds that are kind of, when you're looking at investing in single family homes, remote work. We have inflation. And he considers this a benefit because, as you know, inflation raises your your house value, that's kind of a good thing, because then you'll have more equity in the house. And so when commodities increase in value, the real estate increases in value. Slowing birth rates. So he thinks that in 30-ish years out, we're going to see a lot fewer people because of all these things that are happening. That's people just aren't having as many babies anymore. We're seeing the political rent controls in different cities. We're seeing short-term rentals that people are using, so they might not be buying or renting a place and staying in one spot. So you're seeing some of that transient people. So he does portfolio management for people, investors. And so there's some tailwinds that also he was talking about. So the tailwinds, which meaning these are things that are actually good for the real estate market. There is a lack of construction, especially in entry-level homes. So buying existing homes is more popular than ever. There's a massive pent-up demand from younger generations. So overpriced equities. So the stock market's been inflated for so long, so people are starting to look at real estate as an investment. International flight to safety for America. So people aren't flying as much. There's enormous wealth transfer to millennials, from the boomers to the millennials. Soaring commodity prices, existing low rate mortgage creating housing shortages, and there's a record high equity and FICO scores of the existing homeowners. And what that means is that either you have a lot of equity in your house or you can qualify to buy houses. So home equity is up 34% year over year. Thought that was quite fascinating. 40% of houses owned in the United States are free and clear. And 28% of buyers in March of 2022 pay cash. Pretty crazy. All right, so housing market versus great financial crisis, or the Great Recession, he calls it. So that was in 2007, 2008, 2009. He predicted that there'd be a 12% increase in real estate pricing last year. He predicted that rents would be up 8%. He was right in both of those. Pretty smart guy. Capitalism allocates resources to the right place naturally. So if you have a free market capitalism environment, the resources in that environment are going to be allocated to where they're needed. So if there's housing that's needed, and you're incentivized to provide housing, then that's going to be a benefit. So next we'll talk about real inflation. And so real inflation, 6% mortgage rate, or 17%, 6% mortgage rate, net is 11% profit. So, and then potential tax saving. This is if you invest in single family homes compared to real inflation out there. So that was pretty interesting. Propertytracker.com is Jason's company, bought that. It's a resource online that you can check out to kind of get some of this data. And if you want to see all of his slides, you can go to jasonhartman.com/slides. Shadow Stats is another resource that he uses. That's pretty good. That's how he got the 17% inflation versus the whatever they call it now, 8 or whatever percent that is being advertised on mainstream media, or just the governments are reporting on. And so home size has increased by 150%, payment per square foot. But he thinks that compared to things like rice and oil, housing is still very cheap. Super fascinating. He thinks that there's going to be an increasing renter population. I agree. And the most people do agree. So, all right, let me pause this for a second.